Below is a narrative-style explanation of Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lechter, weaving the chapter-by-chapter summary into a cohesive story that captures the book's essence, themes, and lessons. The narrative follows the journey of Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lechter, blending their personal experiences with the lessons imparted by Kiyosaki's two fathers, his poor dad and rich dad. Each chapter's core ideas are integrated naturally, maintaining the emotional and philosophical depth of the book while drawing from the provided document. The tone is engaging, reflective, and inspirational, mirroring the book's aim to awaken financial intelligence. The Road to Financial Wisdom, a tale of two dads. In the warm, sunlit streets of Hawaii, a young boy named Robert Kiyosaki stood at a crossroads, his heart heavy with a child's simple yet profound question: how do I become rich? It was 1956, and at 9 years old, Robert felt the sting of exclusion when his wealthy friend Jimmy left him and his best friend Mike behind, calling them poor kids. Determined to change his fate, Robert turned to the two men who shaped his world: his biological father, a scholarly educator he called Poor Dad, and Mike's father, an uneducated but savvy entrepreneur he dubbed Rich Dad. Their contrasting answers would spark a lifelong journey, one that Robert, alongside co-author Sharon Lechter, would later share with the world in Rich Dad, Poor Dad: The Awakening, A Mother's Quest, Introduction. Across the Pacific, decades later in 1996, Sharon Lechter sat at her kitchen table, her mind racing. As a CPA with a prestigious career at a Big 8 accounting firm, she'd followed the path her parents preached: study hard, get good grades, land a secure job. Her husband, Michael, a patent lawyer, had done the same. Yet despite their success, they found themselves job hopping, with no pensions and retirement savings dependent on their own contributions. The promise of early retirement felt like a mirage. Then her teenage son came home from school, bored and defiant, declaring, "I'm going to be rich, with or without college." He pointed to icons like Michael Jordan, Madonna, and Bill Gates, proof that the old rules no longer applied. Sharon's heart sank. She'd given her son the same advice her parents gave her: get good grades, go to college, find a safe job. But his words echoed a truth she couldn't ignore. The world had changed. Schools taught algebra and literature, but nothing about taxes, investments, or debt. Her son's credit card debt as a college freshman was a wake-up call. Desperate for answers, Sharon's husband introduced her to Robert Kiyosaki, a businessman with a new educational game called cash flow. Playing it with her daughter, Sharon saw financial concepts, balance sheets, income statements, assets, liabilities, come alive in a colorful board game. It was a revelation, escaping the rat race, that soul-crushing cycle of working hard only to pay bills, taxes, and debts, required financial literacy. Inspired, Sharon joined forces with Robert to write a book that would teach others to think like the rich. Two Fathers, Two Paths. Chapter 1: Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Back in Hawaii, young Robert faced a dilemma. His poor dad, a PhD in Hawaii's superintendent of education, was brilliant but financially strapped. He believed the love of money is the root of all evil, urged Robert to study for a good job, and saw his house as his greatest asset. Meanwhile, Rich Dad, who never finished 8th grade, owned warehouses, restaurants, and a construction company. He countered that the lack of money is the root of all evil, taught Robert to ask, "How can I afford it?" instead of saying, "I can't afford it," and viewed a house as a liability unless it made money. Robert was torn. Poor Dad's mantra, "I can't afford it," felt like a mental dead end, while Rich Dad's questions sparked creativity. Poor Dad relied on government benefits. Rich Dad championed self-reliance. One saw taxes as a duty, the other saw them as a penalty for earning. Robert spent hours pondering their words, realizing that thoughts shaped destinies. Poor Dad's prophecy, "I'll never be rich," became reality, while Rich Dad, even after financial setbacks, declared, "I'm a rich man. Broke is temporary, poor is eternal." At 9, Robert chose to follow Rich Dad's path, inspired by Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. It was a painful decision, but it set him on a journey to financial freedom. The first lesson, Money Works for the Rich, Chapter 2, Lesson 1. The Rich Don't Work for Money. Hurt by Jimmy's snub, Robert and Mike, his partner in crime, sought Poor Dad's advice on getting rich. Poor Dad, a school teacher, admitted, "I don't know," and pointed them to Rich Dad. Eager, the boys hatched a plan to melt toothpaste tubes, made of lead in the 1950s, into nickels. Their production line, complete with a hibachi grill and plaster molds, churned out fake coins until Poor Dad gently explained counterfeiting's illegality. "You're creative," he said. "Keep going, don't quit." Rich Dad offered to teach them, but not in a classroom. "Work for me and I'll show you," he said, offering 10 cents an hour, pitiful even for 1956. Robert, sacrificing a softball game, accepted, learning to seize opportunities decisively. For weeks, he and Mike dusted cans at Rich Dad's superette, bored and frustrated. When they demanded a raise, Rich Dad challenged them, "Think beyond wages. The rich don't work for money, they make money work for them." He described the rat race where fear of poverty and desire for luxuries trap people in jobs. The lesson sank in. Wealth came from creating systems, businesses, investments that generated income, not from trading time for dollars. The foundation, knowing assets from liabilities. Chapter 3, Lesson 2. Why Teach Financial Literacy? As Robert grew, Rich Dad drilled the importance of financial literacy. "Most people struggle because they don't understand money," he said, sketching income statements and balance sheets. "Assets put money in your pocket, liabilities take it out." Poor Dad's house, with its mortgage and upkeep, was a liability, draining his income. Rich Dad's rental properties and businesses were assets, fueling his wealth. Kiyosaki learned to read cash flow like a story. The poor and middle class earned from jobs, spent on liabilities, cars, houses, and had little left for assets. The rich earned from assets, stocks, real estate, businesses that covered expenses and funded more investments. "Rule first," Rich Dad said, "is to know the difference between an asset and a liability, and buy assets." Schools, Rich Dad noted, ignored this, leaving doctors and lawyers financially illiterate despite high incomes. Robert began tracking his own finances, vowing to build his asset column. Building Your Empire. Chapter 4, Lesson 3, Mind Your Own Business. Rich Dad's next lesson hit hard, mind your own business. Robert was confused. Didn't he mean his job? No. Rich Dad clarified. Your job pays bills, but your business builds wealth. Your business is your asset column. Poor Dad worked for the government, pouring his energy into someone else's system. Rich Dad built his own. Stores, warehouses, investments. Robert saw the trap. People spent lifetimes strengthening their employer's business, not their own. Even professionals, like doctors, traded time for money, limited by hours in a day. Rich Dad urged Robert to start small, buy a stock, a rental property, or start a side venture. Keep your day job, he said, but focus on your own business. Inspired, Robert began dabbling in real estate, learning that wealth grew not from a paycheck, but from assets he controlled. The System's Secrets. Chapter 5, Lesson 4. The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations. One evening, Rich Dad explained taxes, a lesson that shocked Robert. Taxes were designed to fund governments, but they punish workers and reward the rich, he said. Historically, taxes targeted the wealthy, but over time, Governments leaned on employees whose income was taxed before they saw it. The rich, using corporations, deferred taxes, reinvested profits, and shielded wealth legally. Poor Dad believed in paying taxes dutifully. Rich Dad saw them as a game to play smartly. Corporations, Rich Dad taught, were vehicles for wealth building, offering deductions, e.g., business expenses, and flexibility employees lacked. Robert learned to structure his ventures through corporations, minimizing taxes and maximizing reinvestment. Financial IQ, Rich Dad said, is knowing how to play the system's rules to your advantage. Creating wealth. Chapter 6, Lesson 5. The rich invent money. Rich Dad's lessons grew bolder. The rich don't wait for money. They invent it, he declared. While Poor Dad played it safe, Rich Dad took calculated risks, turning ideas into assets. He shared stories of buying distressed properties at auctions, or negotiating deals others overlooked. Opportunities are everywhere, he said, but fear and ignorance blind people. Robert tested this, buying a foreclosed condo for $50,000 with a cashier's check, then renting it out to recover his investment in 3 years. He pulled his money out, keeping the asset for free, a technique called being an Indian giver in investing. Rich Dad taught him to limit losses, play with house money, and seek something for nothing, like free land or stock shares. Robert realized financial intelligence wasn't about resources but resourcefulness. Learning over Earning. Chapter 7, Lesson 6. Work to learn, don't work for money. As a teenager, Robert wanted a high-paying job, but Rich Dad advised, work to learn, not to earn. Poor Dad valued credentials. Rich Dad valued skills, communication, leadership, financial acumen. Learn what schools don't teach, he urged. Robert took low-paying jobs in sales and marketing, mastering skills that later fueled his businesses. Rich Dad emphasized 3 management skills: cash flow, people, and time. Robert saw Poor Dad manage budgets but not investments, while Rich Dad managed teams and portfolios. By working to learn, Robert built a foundation for entrepreneurship, far outweighing a fat paycheck's short-term allure. Breaking barriers. Chapter 8. Overcoming obstacles. Years later, as Robert built his wealth, he reflected on obstacles that trapped others in the rat race. Fear of loss kept people in safe jobs. Cynicism dismissed opportunities as too good to be true. Ignorance, from lack of financial education, led to poor decisions, like buying liabilities. Arrogance blinded professionals who thought they knew enough, and bad habits, like dipping into savings, eroded wealth. Rich Dad's solution was discipline. Face fears, question cynicism, seek knowledge, learn from experts, and break habits through small, consistent actions. Robert overcame his own doubts by starting small, buying a single stock, reading a book, and building confidence over time. Taking action. Chapter 9. Getting started. Now a successful investor, Robert shared practical steps to ignite financial genius. Stop doing what doesn't work, he advised, echoing Rich Dad's call to reassess habits. He scoured bookstores for new ideas, took classes, and made offers on properties, even lowball ones. Knowing negotiations sparked deals. He jogged neighborhoods, spotting real estate bargains, and networked with mentors, like a tax lien expert, who guided him to 16% returns. Robert emphasized action over perfection. Most people dream but don't do, he said. He bought a $5,000 property that grew into a $1 million asset in 6 years, proving small steps compounded. Heroes like Warren Buffett and Donald Trump inspired him to emulate their strategies, while giving, teaching others, multiplied his own learning. A Legacy of Learning. Chapter 10. Still want more? Here are some to-dos. As the book neared its end, Robert and Sharon shared a final story. A friend struggled to save $400,000 for his kids' college. In 1991, with Phoenix's real estate market in a slump, Robert suggested buying a $79,000 house with a $7,000 down payment. Rented out, it generated $125 monthly, applied to the mortgage. By 1994, the house sold for $156,000, and the proceeds funded a mini storage facility yielding $3,000 monthly. With $7,000 in financial intelligence, the friend met his goal, proving money worked harder than labor. Epilogue. A call to choose wealth. Robert and Sharon closed with a heartfelt plea. Money is an idea, they wrote. Change your thinking, and you change your life. They urged readers to invest in their minds, read, learn, act, and teach their children to do the same. Every dollar was a choice. Spend it on liabilities and stay middle class, or invest it in assets and choose wealth. Robert's journey, from a curious boy to a retired investor at 47, and Sharon's transformation, from a CPA to an education advocate, showed it was possible. As Robert reflected on his two dads, he saw Poor Dad's struggle as a cautionary tale and Rich Dad's success as a blueprint. The world, with its economic shifts and technological leaps, demanded financial intelligence. Don't play it safe, they wrote. Play it smart. With their book, they handed readers the map to financial freedom, hoping they'd take the road less traveled, just as Robert had. This narrative captures the heart of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, transforming its lessons into a compelling story of discovery, resilience, and empowerment, while staying true to the document's content and the book's mission to awaken financial genius.